Welcome to this, episode 173 of Frame and Reference. You're about to drop in on a conversation between me, Kenny McMillan, and my guest, Tari Segal, DP of Interior Chinatown. Enjoy. NAB, I want to say 2 years ago, the guy who runs Film Tools was showing me how to play craps. So we're playing craps and it's fun. And I am not doing well. And the year before that, he'd showed me, but I forgot. And I did quite well. So I was a little upset. And they're like, you know what? You go to the B&H party. He found me a wristband, and I go into the B&H party. In there all night, run into Jay Holben, who I'm friends with, and we're hanging out.
Oh yeah, Jay. He's great.
He's the best.
Yeah.
And Katie was there. So then I leave and don't see the guys. Obviously, they had taken off. The next morning, they're pretty hungover, but in a really good mood. And I was like, all right, whatever. We're all in a good mood. And on the trip back, my buddy Adam was like, I'm not going to lie, man. We each won $5,000.
Oh, man.
Because I guess the guy who owns Bentley or something like that, Maserati. He was wearing a Maserati jacket, just drinking straight milk. And someone goes oh, because it was the race team jacket. And he goes, oh, yeah. Some guy goes, you a fan? And he goes, I'm in the family, and then rolls.
Oh, that's a sight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was just trying to get quick games in, like I said, when my buddy was coming down the elevator to meet me for something, and he came down and he saw me with this look on my face, and I was like, I just lost $50. Do you think next time you could come down a little bit quicker? Yeah. And maybe it could be trouble, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. The thing that I hate about that whole experience is it's nice to go out and meet people, right? So you're like, oh, hey, let's go grab a drink somewhere. I've only found one bar in Vegas, and it's really hidden, which is hilarious, that has drinks for normal prices. Otherwise, if you're hanging out in the casinos, it's cheaper to lose money at the craps table.
Yes.
And get free drinks, which of course they engineer.
Yeah, you gotta just hang around the slot machine and wait for a waitress to come around.
Yeah, it's worse than Staples Center prices, and Staples Center's pretty bad.
Yeah, I never really hung out with people outside the convention or the casinos. There weren't really any hangout spots.
No, there's this one really good one. It's in somewhere, but it's called Ski Lodge, and it's modeled after a ski lodge, but it's very small. But it has just normal, probably normal for LA, but normal prices for stuff. And it's a nice hang. I usually go in there because I'm literally only in Vegas for NAB.
Yeah,
I've never
Where
been
are you
back
the rest of the time? Are you in LA?
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I mean, I go out for drinks there with, people for meetings, and it's all, $20 martinis.
Yeah.
It can be. Yeah.
I was just in New York, and for a documentary I was shooting, and I was just riding the train to go. My friend owns this bar called Death and Co. So I went down there.
Great place.
Great place. And so I go there for a couple hours, leave, and I just get on the train to go somewhere else. And this kid was like, oh, no, you got to go to Martini's. I think he might have been a bar back there or something. He's like, you got to go to Martini's. You got to go to Martini's. I was like, okay. So I go over there, and yeah, same thing. All the martinis, very expensive at Martini's, but everyone was so nice. Everyone says New York people are not nice. Everyone wanted to show me where to go, and I was wearing LA gear. I had a Dodgers hat on.
Yeah. I avoided New York for such a long time, and then I had a job there about 6 years ago. I did FBI there.
Right.
And I fell in love with New York. And now I try to go as often as I can because I loved the, in LA, sometimes you're a bit secluded, or, you have to drive out to go to your bars and stuff. But in New York, it was just so many places to go, and they're so small, and they're never really crowded. I mean, in the off times that people in our industry work, not the regular times. And so it was great, and it's every place was good.
Yeah, and especially in your I just learned all the geography, but in your Chelsea or whatever, it's prime competition in terms of not just real estate, but there's so many other great things going on. that you got to be on it, you know?
Yeah, and the decor, environment, the mood, atmosphere of these places it's just
The vibes are
it's
tight.
great. The vibes, right?
Because
Yeah.
you grew up in Chicago, right?
Yeah, that's where I am right now.
Oh, word. See,
Yeah.
that's another great underrated film city
It's a
and food and
great
shit. But
city. Oh, it's such a beautiful city, and um you know, I always thought that it was just a very iconic town to shoot in. And I'm surprised that not more shows come here, except that I get it. It's in the middle of nowhere, perhaps, but it's beautiful. It's clean. Everyone's afraid of the seasons, but honestly, Michigan and Wisconsin get worse weather than we do.
yeah,
Everyone's like, "Oh, they're afraid of the windy city," and I'm like, "It's only windy because of our politicians." I mean, that's why it's called the Windy City. It's not actually called that because of the wind.
right. Boston's windy as shit. Boston's the
Yeah,
windy city.
and Boston's cold as fuck in the winter.
yeah.
Yeah, you see those videos too of upstate and all that stuff on the East Coast, and they're shoveling out 6 feet of snow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
no,
it's
Chicago's tight.
yeah, Chicago's dope, but Boston definitely. I visited. I was dating a girl once who lived out there. She moved from where we were to there, and yeah, it's when I finally understood the term bone chilling cold. I snowboard semi professionally every winter in Colorado. It can get cold, but that was
Yeah.
a different Chicago by was much better, not bone chilling.
No, Chicago's fine. I mean, just like in the summers, you'll get like 2, 3 weeks of really bad humidity where it's awful. In the winter, I say this and everyone's probably scoffing at me, but I
Right.
mean, when you grow up in a cold city like that, you kind of learn how to get used to it. So it has to be really cold for you to actually complain where like the hairs in your nose freeze.
Right.
That's that like bone chilling cold you're talking about. It. Yeah.
Well, and to your point about people not shooting there, it's like, first of all, most of these productions are taking it to, Bulgaria or wherever, which is not in the middle
Oh,
of nowhere, but
yeah.
much further away than Chicago. But also, think of all of our favorite films from like the 80s and 90s. Tons of them shot in Chicago.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I
We're,
remember, I remember, it's one of the reasons I became a filmmaker too, was, walking around downtown Chicago. I have a big Chicago family.
mm,
Um, we have a jazz club in my family that we've had since 47.
oh,
So
sick.
I was always downtown with the musicians and stuff, and you would see these movie trucks parked all the time. And it was it's a big Teamster town, uh, mafia town,
Right.
in a way, that history. And it was always very exciting to me. And yeah, all these movies were made. I went to film school at Columbia, and then we lost all of this business to Canada at the time. It was like the early 2000s. And there was so much business that had left that Kodak even closed their offices, I believe, at that time. And
Right.
so for me and my friends, it was like, oh, maybe we should go to LA at this point. So I left to LA. I have friends who have stayed, and they're right now they're doing really well. And I was so excited to see them. Like a friend of mine is the gaffer on The Bear, and
Nice.
they're just like, I'm so happy for them that Chicago has become such a great place to shoot in, and that a lot of work has come back.
Yeah.
But for a while though, it had really just dried up.
Was that due to the first writer strike? When I say first, but the second to last one.
Right, right. It was before that. It was before that because I remember that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding
Yeah.
came out, and everyone was up in arms who were in Chicago because we're like, it wasn't shot in Chicago. It was shot in Canada. And it
Yeah.
really was a sign of that. Everything that was supposed to be in Chicago is being shot in Toronto.
Yeah, you guys tripped me out with the interior Chinatown because I saw the bungalow and I was like, oh, so they really did shoot it in Chinatown. And then I go on your Instagram and I'm like, it's a set.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was an incredible set. I've been on some big sets, but this one, we were at the Fox studio, and they built basically a whole street. So on the pilot, to get some scope, we did go to the Universal lot, and Mike Berlucci shot that with Taika. And I shot some stuff there too, but we only had it, we could only afford it for about a week and a half. So they built just the exterior on the back lot. And then all the interiors for the whole show were built on the stage. So the restaurant was a working restaurant. They built it to scale, and out the windows is a whole block and, you know, storefronts and stuff. And we lit that with like hundreds of sky panels and everything. And it was so much fun because you look out the windows and it really didn't feel like we were on location.
Yeah. I was going to ask about that because that first episode does look probably only to my eye, but, and also I'm watching it because I'm like looking to ask questions, but like it did look slightly different than all, because I know you and your shooting partner, you know, alternated them, but the first episode looks different than all of them slightly, at least to my eye. Maybe it was just more lighting cues or something, but
it was the first one. I mean, the first one was really, it's, first of all, it's a very complicated story, and we were all just like how are we gonna, you know, translate this to a visual medium, because it's all like written in the words of the script, like the light follows them, and we would ask Charles, who's the showrunner and the writer, we're like, so what does that mean, Charlie? And he'd be like, that's a good question, what do you think it means? And like, wow. And we'd have these conversations where we're just like, I think it's this. And they're like, let's see it, let's try it. And so there was a lot of that going on. And so anyway, so they're trying to establish it in the first episode. And so they wanted to take advantage of outside the restaurant. So they actually shot a lot of outside the restaurant because they knew we would be on stage for so much of it. So that's why it has that a different look, because it was actually outside and in the elements, which is sometimes you can control and not, you know, that whole thing. And the idea of the Willis world or the Chinatown world was to try and not control so many things. It was to be more in the practical lighting and not do so much filmic lighting, so that it really has a different vibe from the black and white show.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when episode 2 comes around, my job was really to establish the black and white show, because now we have to see more of it. And so it had to be something, you know, we had a 8-day schedule for every episode. Still, it was 8 or 9 day. It was still pretty tight. And
that's like normal. That's like back when they used to do like Star Trek and shit, you know, 87 episode season.
Yeah, it was, you know, it was pretty tight. And that's why it was so exciting to shoot, because they gave us a lot of freedom to do what we had to do to get it done. And it, I could be wrong, it was maybe 9 days.
Still. But
these lighting cues, they were things that just had to be done on the fly, because you had to see, you know, you do a blocking, you can guess where people might go and stuff, but you don't want to corner them into something, especially in such improv world. So you really had to be on the fly, like, where can we get a light to backlight them? Because the black and white show has to have tight eye lines, studio mode, you know, a strong backlight and a strong key light. And then you have to dissolve that out into the real world. And so everything was we tried to do it practically. And even going from handheld to studio was a whole thing too.
Yeah. I mean, that does unlock. So I'm not going to lie. I was going to watch the first episode, obviously, and then your 4. And then I started at like 9 p.m. last night, and then episode 3 rolls around, and then I was like, oh, I'll watch it. And then 4, and then I was like, well, I'll finish. And so I finished it. So I went to bed at 6 this morning.
No. But you finished the whole show?
The whole show, yeah. Banged it out in one go. It's a great show. Wow. I really liked it. But
yeah,
the reason being was I was just having so much fun, like watching.
It goes all over the place.
But also like I was taking notes on my phone like an idiot. Normally I write on paper, so I don't have to look at my phone when I'm talking. But the number of lighting cues and the number of looks, I just kept going like, that had to be fucking fun. Like to get that much, like I'd probably be wrong, but I counted at least 6 different specific looks versus, outside and inside might look different, but like, and I was wondering if you guys had like, if you have a count of how many specific looks you had to invent, and also what went into them besides just like this one's blue and this one's green.
Oh no, that's a cheat. I don't have a count because it was kind of like running off of adrenaline because again the schedule was so quick.
Yeah.
So Mike and I would just share. And by the way, you alternate with DPs, and sometimes the relationship is very like you're just on your own, and there's just no relationship there. With Mike, on the other hand, it was so much fun. He's so collaborative. We were like, we became good friends, and what we did is we would share notes on like what we were doing because every episode is so different and requires different things. Like, oh, I did this, and what are you doing? Oh, cool, I'm gonna do something like that, And so we were building upon each other's looks, and there's I mean, just to start, there's the Willis world, which was really based and influenced off of early Wong Kar-wai, Christopher Doyle stuff.
I didn't want to say it because I didn't want it to sound racist, but I was like, this is very much Wong Kar-wai looking, and
it's definitely Fallen Angels. The idea was to be very dirty, mixed color light, grainy, wide lenses to feel the locations really trapping you in there. I mean, the bedrooms in the SRO literally were built that way. They were really small rooms. We didn't move, even though we had the ability to move walls, thankfully, to a great rigging team. We never did. We just stayed true to being in the space.
I have interviewed plenty of people who have talked about this, and it's not that I've been converted, but I now fully believe it. It's like the audience can tell. The audience can tell when the camera has to be in there versus when you can fly out a wall and just and it might change things for the better or the worse on that sort of perception, but they can tell whether they know it or not.
I agree. With an audience, when it comes to an audience, I don't think they always know the things they like, but they do respond to the things we show them and give them. And I think it's always good to keep pushing for that, even though people don't know how to explain the things that they like. But it is very fun to know that you're in a practical place that feels small and is small. There's just something about inequality to how you're forced to shoot people like closer and everything. I think it was very appropriate. And then Lana comes around, and at the beginning in episode 2, Lana to me was very like a film noir character. And it could be because I saw her and I was like, I was like, Chloe's really cool, so I'm going to shoot her very film noir-y. And so everything was like low and wide and static for her until she starts to unravel and becomes this like a person with a lot of faults. But in the very beginning, she's even on the phone call with Willis, just like, with her sunglasses at high angle, just down at her. And she's in charge and in control, and she can't drive. So, the joke is that we shot on the LED stage and made it really fake, and we had airbags under the car just knocking Willis around, and she's just looking back and not even looking ahead. That whole joke, it was so much fun.
I loved it. It was hard to tell at first, but it's part of the narrative. This is probably the most meta narrative show I think I've seen in forever, but her not being able to drive and just like not even realizing that she didn't know how to drive was just one example of what I thought was a very playful way to approach the like they're in a TV show thing. Because even with a show like Kevin Can Fuck Himself, I was like, are they gonna actually use this? And then they don't. Really, they use it as a storytelling convention, but they don't go into the idea of like, no, they actually are in a TV show, which I was kind of hoping for. And I think this show does a great job of going just far enough that it's interesting without it being like too much of a gimmick, I suppose.
I always felt like the TV show part of it, which exists but doesn't exist,
Right.
right? Because everyone is real. Is just an added layer to the story of Willis trying to find his brother. But there are a lot of clues and funny things in it. For example, in that episode too, she comes around, she hits that garbage can, like she always hits that garbage can. And that janitor outside is always cleaning it up and resetting it. You don't notice it, but he's always cleaning it
I
up.
didn't
And
even
if
pick
you,
up on that, but
you
yeah.
know,
And
Willis
it's
is,
the only prop on the street.
yeah, it's the only prop on the street. And then when Willis is like trying to get into the police store and he's talking to him, if you look at the background is just resetting itself, and they'll stop in frame and turn around and go back the other way. As
That's
if
so good.
a second is like, when you get here, go back, that whole thing. So you'll see the same background just doing the same thing if you were to pay attention to it. And then
Right.
when because the show, you never know what's in the background of the show. So that's why they're doing that. But when the show was gone, all the background disappeared.
Yeah, right.
That's the idea. So, yeah.
You know what else threw me off about the whole like meta narrative thing was, so I was watching on Hulu on which, by the way, was the show pitched to Hulu first?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. I don't, because I want to have like an open discussion about this show, but I don't, for people who haven't seen it yet, I'll try to be as vague as possible. But what a pull to have that note land, towards the end there, having
Oh, yeah, yeah.
that work out.
Well, I won't. I'll tell you later. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, you tell me now. I'll just chop it.
No, I was just gonna say, uh, that was a good thing about shooting with Hulu. I mean, we didn't have a big budget as far as a lot of shows go, and Hulu does that, but they do allow us to be more creative. So you might not have as much money, but I do find that Hulu does have a tendency to like give people a chance to do something different.
Right. And we do appreciate that, big companies.
Yeah, right.
But another thing that threw me off was, so I was watching it on my TV, on my computer. I build computers. I'm a giant nerd. I'm tech guy. And so there's like ad blockers and whatever. Sorry to take your half a penny. And so when I switched to my computer, I didn't notice it. But the first few episodes I watched on my TV, and there was a FedEx ad, but the FedEx ad starts with two women talking to each other like, "Hey, are you watching Interior China?" And I was like, and it didn't start like FedEx. It was just two women talking in front of a FedEx box, and I thought it was part of the show.
Oh, that's funny.
And then it was just a FedEx ad. And I was like, wait, hold on. And I was like, this is a brilliant tie-in if this was like intentional.
That is a brilliant tie-in.
I want to know who did that, not who shot it, although it looked great.
It's brilliant because, the show dabbles in commercials and going to commercials, which is, and it kind of just throws you off that way. That's pretty funny. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's one of the few times that like I've mentioned this way too many times. I need to get out of the past, but I used to work at Red Bull, and I was fascinated by the way that this would have been like 2010-ish. I was fascinated by the way that they would subvert marketing norms, especially in collegiate settings. And so I've always just been giving people their props when they do something that just exists outside of, especially nowadays with like social media and stuff. It's like, well, we have to have an Instagram campaign, we have to have a TikTok campaign, and we need to pay Google SEO. And you're like, okay, but what else? And they're like, nah, those are our 4 things. And I'm like, that's boring.
I know. I miss being excited for Super Bowl ads.
Yeah.
That makes, you know what I mean? Like I miss like the really, innovative, creative advertisement world that used to like push limits and exciting things would happen every year. That was fun.
I am starting to notice. I mean, it's been brewing, but like now it's really starting to hit, and that is that I guess the younger Gen Zers, or maybe they're in their mid-20s now. I don't really, but whatever demographic we're saying is pushing culture. are very aggressively swinging back to like quick post 9/11 culture. And I mean like early internet, Jinko jeans, you know, that whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the Starburst berries and cream boy and like all those
Yeah.
really off the wall type ads
Yeah.
are all starting to gain popularity again. And even, you know, films from the era and stuff, there's a lot of at least chatter on like TikTok or wherever, like, why can't they do this again? And I'm just hoping that we're not so far
Yeah.
into corporate ownership land that won't take a chance, you know, especially because we don't
Yeah. I
have like
suppose it's
traditional home
like,
video.
I guess there's always ebb and flows of everything, and it always goes like all the way to this side and then maybe starts to come back a bit. But I can't imagine people don't miss that, and that's the thing too about AGI and AI, where I'm like, you can dabble in and stuff, but I do think that audiences and people, they really do crave a bit of authenticity. They crave some texture, so that exists, and you still need creative people to bring that, like Charlie writing this book. I mean, it's so different and cool. It's just out of the norm. And I think things like that are kind of cool to still have around,
Mm.
these original concepts.
Well, and so I'm fascinated you brought that up because uh you know, probably once in a episode I bring up that I need to get off Reddit, and then I don't because you know, something like this happens where I need to bring it up, and Reddit will suggest things, you know, like anything, you know, hey, check out this community. And recently it's been sending me this AI wars community, which is primarily people arguing in favor of AI art generation. And it's fascinating to read because I'm bringing up one of the quotes, but it's fascinating to read because it does feel. I don't want to speak about the pro AI community so aggressively right now because I still haven't had the time to read all of these things. But they're all looking at it in such a technical, clinical way that is the kind of what I believe to be the antithesis of art. They're all results based. You know, why should I pay someone X amount of dollars for X amount of time to get something that doesn't meet exactly what I want?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not the point. One person in this the thread I was thinking of was like, hey, you know, the journey's kind of the point. And they were like, no, what are you talking about? And I was like, this is so fascinating that all these people, this like contempt for artists. And they will all, I've gotten a few comments where people have like a legitimate contempt for the art of art or the process of it. They just want the result and they only want it for themselves. And if they do want to share it, they want credit for having prompted the thing to make the image.
Right.
Like they put in,
Right.
but it's empty calories. I mean, we've been talking about empty calorie content for how many
So
decades now?
interesting. But that it's so ego driven, which
Yeah.
is with art, it's um I mean, ego driven from that's fine to have from the artist and the creator. You're creating your own art, but as for the masses, you're creating art for the masses. So I wonder how that conversation goes of what it is that they like themselves that's not theirs.
So the thing that I've seen, well, a lot of people will, on one hand, say like it's not stealing content, and then on the other hand, they'll be like, "Look what this thing I made," and it's like
Mhm.
Star Wars stuff. But the nope, completely lost that thought. Where the hell was that? It's them saying I've got such an amazing idea. My idea is perfect. I'm just
Mhm.
unable to execute it, and that's what AI gives me. Now, in some cases, if you're severely, well, I shouldn't say severely, but if you're disabled to the point where you can't make that thing, I understand that being a tool for you to use and yada yada. But the idea of I have the most amazing idea ever,
Yeah.
we were all young enough to also think that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people think that every day they have the most amazing idea and you put it out and there it goes and that's it. I think it's received or not. It there's it's a tool. I think my opinion of it is, change is inevitable, and like when HD was first starting, and a lot of DPs were like, "Oh, I'm only going to shoot film." Some film schools, I won't mention which, were like, our DPs only shoot film.
Mm.
Oh,
Oh, we lost you. Dang it.
dang.
It's crapping out again.
It's probably me.
It's the AirPods. I'll blame Apple for anything.
Listen to AirPods.
Not Apple TV, though. They're great.
How's that?
That's good. That's fine.
Okay.
Speaking of AI, I use the Adobe Podcast Enhance on every episode, and it makes it sound perfect.
Well, yeah, I need to. I haven't quite invested in the AI yet, but I was just saying that there is an appreciation still for art of the past and films of the past, and I think you learn a lot about how you want to say things from that, and I don't think that'll change. AI is a tool. I mean, I'm excited to see if it helps with previs. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That would be exciting. Anything that could help narrow down or expand on ideas to capture it better. But I mean, I don't want everything I shoot to not exist. It's bad enough that we're shooting. No, I don't want to say bad enough. It's one thing that we're now shooting digitally, and everything is translated to ones and zeros versus a photograph that happens with not film. But to not even have anything in the room and it's all generated, I think that, and it's interesting.
It's to our point about being able to fly out walls or not. Like, you can feel it, you can tell. And the argument on these discussions, these AI discussions online, seem to be like, well, at one point it'll get good enough that you can't tell, and it's like, so you want to live in the Matrix? Like, you're fine with that. And I remember an interview with Keanu Reeves a couple of years ago when the fourth one came out, and his like nephew or his friend's son, daughter, someone said that they didn't care. Like, they had never seen the movie, but he described it to them, and they were like, "Why would you care?" And he thought that was fascinating, and I'm like, I find it fascinating to try to get it to truly understand other people's points of view, no matter what they are. And that's one that I'm really grappling with, because that means that we haven't given these people enough to look forward to in the real world right? Because like that's why you want to be in the real world, because it's better.
Yeah. I always think it's fascinating because I don't know that it's an original idea then if you leave it up to AI.
Right.
Like if it's such a collection of everything. And lately, stealing from all these scripts that have been written from the Shonda Rhimes camp.
Oh my God.
I mean, so are you saying that it's still an original idea, or is it a collection of everyone's information?
So they all seem to say, and again, I'm speaking out of turn because I'm not the people who are pro AI, but they all seem to say that the data set is wide enough that it's not copying, it's a diffusion of everything, which is no different than a human mind doing the same thing. My argument is it's worse, because a human mind has taste and chooses what they want to filter their own story through, let's say, 3 to 5 influences, and create something new. Taking everything and generating something quote unquote perfect to your taste is what I heard someone described as perfect mediocrity. When you average out everything, you get 50%.
Yeah.
So that's my thought.
I'm a bit positive about it all. I'm not a big AI in the future person, but I'm positive about audiences going back to the things that they like and they want. I mean, it's just like every generation goes back, and they want, like you said, the Gen Z people saying, "Oh, let's go back to these commercials and stop seeing people saying the same things and like tapping on like, like, yeah. Oh my God, that whole thing of like."
They understand autofocus, but they don't understand setting focus.
I know.
Just
so funny. The ASMR thing, I don't know. There's a place for it. I'm just gonna keep. I think we just keep doing what we're doing,
Yeah.
and be open to new tools. I guess.
I did want to read one comment that I saw on Reddit because I thought this was brilliant. I went and looked up what other people thought about the show in the Chinatown, and so many people first off were like, "This show looks incredible." So you nailed it there.
Great.
But this one I thought was, speaking of youthful ignorance, uh, I'm writing a book, and if it ever got popular enough to be turned into a TV show or a movie, this was a very toxic subreddit, by the way. Just want to throw that out there.
Okay.
I won't say what it is, but it's incel adjacent. I'm writing a book, and if it ever got popular enough to be turned into a TV show or movie, I would 100% demand that the contract states that I have the final say in all casting choices and can shut down the project at any time if I'm displeased with the direction. I don't care if they offer me $100 million. I will never be a miserable sellout.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, I don't think that person even understands what it takes to make a TV show.
No.
That's a very egocentric view on the business.
That's someone who thinks AI will make their perfect book into a movie script and make their image, whatever. Also, point of story point kind of towards the end of the series.
Yeah.
I love Ronnie Chang, though, by the way.
Oh, Ronnie Chang is great, isn't he?
Big Daily Show fan, and he's always been so good.
It's so funny working on a comedy. I don't always do comedies. I mostly because I like to shoot stuff where the cinematography can, where you can draw from a story and there's like these motivations and stuff. And comedies can go either to live in a world of realism and like a comedy drama, which is fun, or if it's just a straight up comedy, then you really are more just trying
exposing,
right?
Yeah.
But I operated on This Is 40 with Fade and Papa Michael many years ago, and we had like an SNL writer there and Judd Apatow, and they would just spit out lines to like Melissa McCarthy and all of them, and at the end of the day, in the edit room, they could go from G-rated to X-rated with the edit and the cut. And it was so much fun to see. And when we were doing Interior Chinatown, some of the things that would come out of like Ronnie and Jimmy's mouth, like as they're just spitting with each other. I mean, when you watch the final cut, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I remember him saying this instead. And yeah, there's just so many options and ways it could go.
Yeah, the shit, what's her name? I've only had a few hours sleep because but the cop, what's her name?
The blonde one?
Yeah.
Lisa Gilroy.
Yeah, Lisa Gilroy. Have you seen that game show? Like, I mean, she's done a bunch of like improv and great stuff, but that game show, I love that game show.
Hilarious. Oh my God. Like at the ends of Takes Two, like she would do so many like funny things that a lot of them that didn't even make it into the cut. I mean, it was so funny. One of my favorite things for the cop show was, it was early on in episode 2. If you know police procedurals, you always have the walk and talk, right? You just have to gather a lot of information and you do it in a walk and talk. It saves your schedule. And so we did this one where they could have just walked straight to their desk, but instead we have them walk around in a circle just to get all the information out. And also like someone comes in and they perfectly line up, like the medical examiner walks in with the file at the right time. And it was kind of a joke on the walk and talk, but it was so funny because she was just leading the way in the way that Lisa does. And her timing is so impeccable.
Yeah. Also, we will get back to cinematography, but I did want to say, hilarious to get CSI's tech guy, to be Uncle.
Yeah, like I know there's just so many layers that we've added to the thing.
It really is like, everyone likes to say like, oh, you can rewatch it endlessly. And I'm like, but I actually think on this one you probably could.
Yeah.
Um,
And they brought me on. They're like, yeah, you know, you have familiarity with the Dick Wolf world and stuff. And I'm like, uh-huh. And I'm reading it. And I'm like, but this, what you're describing as a look for the black and white show or Law and Order is not very Law and Order, because they actually, especially in the beginning, were much more gritty and desaturated on the Wolf shows. What they were actually describing was more CSI, a lot of color and a lot of backlight and stuff. And so,
blinkies in the background, a lot of
yeah,
blinkies.
exactly. And just blinking lights and stuff going on. And, you know, and so like they were like, oh my God, I didn't even realize it was like how different it is. But in your head, it's like the same thing. So we did a lot of like coverage like Law and Order, but the lighting style came more from like CSI.
Yeah, and I did want to know like how much, because I'm a freelance colorist, so I can tell. How much were you leaning on post to do some of these like color shifts, between worlds essentially, and how much was it lighting cues? But because a lot of the thing I love about most of the stuff in Chinatown is just how much color you guys are able to use. It's just so fun to see, and it's not very common. Whereas obviously the black and white show is a lot more just like steely blues and white light, all that. But yeah, just talk to me about kind of like all the amount of color you guys were allowed to use on set versus how much you had to lean on the colorist.
I mean, we had an idea of what we wanted to do, and there was we shifted color temperatures more, especially in the light. So, in Willis's, you know, in the restaurant in Willis's world, you do have a lot of mixed color and fluorescent lighting, and when the cops come in, all of that lighting becomes very clean. So we take the green out, and it's just straight 32 if that's what we're doing, and so there's that match there, and then
And they're all just Asteras, I assume.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of Titans and stuff like that, and those, you know, Nyx bulbs. Um, and then we would, so we were neutralizing the greens and stuff and had a place to go. In color correction, we went further and really drew black and white apart by adding a little bit more contrast and desaturation, and then but desaturation in some ways, and then adding a lot of richness in the blues too, to really make it a bit colder and that kind of cold cop feel. So there was a big there was a big practical difference on set, and then we were able to pull the colors even more in color correction. But that came later.
Right.
We actually thought we were going to do it all internally, and I think the decision was to ham it up even more.
Sure. Well, it was.
Aiden really helped with finding that.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great. My main thought was more like, was this? I guess it was a leading question. Were you building a show LUT ahead of time, or did you have like different LUTs per sort of setup, or like how are you monitoring on set,
Yeah,
or even pre-production for that matter?
Yeah, we had about two different. We had maybe like three different LUTs aside from episode 8. So we had the Willis world, we had the cop world. Again, if we were shooting one where one was transitioning in, we would stay in one world and we would mix that LUT later.
Right.
In post. And then at the end, when worlds combine and we go to 240 and anamorphic, then we were leaning more towards Mindhunter and True Detective looks, and so there became a heavier look with a bit of that green overcast of things and that kind of palette. Episode 8 though was a series of commercials, and so I had to build a new look for each commercial, so that one was different.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up all that in that order, because for episode 7, shot by my buddy Pete Chapman, not shot by, but directed. Shout out to Pete Chapman. He was on the podcast. I wrote down 7. I thought it had very much like a 7 look to it, but Mindhunter also kind of works. The Fincherian sort of crime look.
In episode 8 or episode 7?
7, whichever one has when they're trying to solve when they're driving around. Maybe it was 8. Again, I binged them all at once.
Around 7. So at the end of 6, there's that last scene that shifts from cop look to
Right.
the new cop look, which is more like worlds combined. And from that, it stays in that throughout 7. Yes.
Yeah. And so that's what I was getting at with all that was really cool. I do want to talk to you about all those ad looks, but before getting there, I just wanted to finish up. Like, what were the lens packages for? Were there different lens packages for each look?
We shot with the P Vintage primes for the first 6 episodes, whether or not it was cop look or whatever. Of course, some of the cop stuff, we would also break out the zoom to give it that, we had a 19 to 90. And sometimes we used some, I'll say vintage, but, video cameras from the 90s, for stuff. And then when we went to anamorphics, we went to the C series.
Classic.
Yeah.
Literally with the C. But anyway, the episode 8, again, I was having so much fun with all the looks you guys got to do. And then it's buffet time for looks. And I was really, I don't want to say impressed because it sounds like it, like, oh, wow. Obviously you're capable, but just like going from, having seen these 2 to 4 looks, kind of back to back to back. And then now it's like high polish ad world. And I was wondering, we'll combine the questions, like besides, the Wong Kar-wai stuff, like, and CSI, were there any other influences that you guys pointed to for the sort of, let's call it, main show? And then what were you guys drawing from for episode 8?
I mean, yeah, for the main show, it literally was the early Wong Kar-wai works, and also some Bruce Lee stuff. I'm sure you've seen the montages. I mean, we copied frames from the Bruce Lee movies and recreated them. And then you have the Law and Order stuff. For the commercials, I think we did like 5 different looks. And again, we're prepping this in 8 days and shooting.
So crazy.
So, but the first one's a whiskey commercial. And so obviously I was like, well, let's look at Matthew McConaughey whiskey commercials. And so we really referenced that. And they left a lot up to me. They're like, go, Tari, these are the commercials. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let me just figure out all these different lighting styles and different looks. And I work with the colorists on trying to find things. And there was that musical Oneer.
Yeah.
Insane. Like
very red shoes almost.
Yeah, we built that within like a week and a half. They just built on an empty stage. We had to build grids. We had like 20 something lights going on cues, and it all just had to happen really quickly and built and designed in like 6 hours and executed. And the Steadicam pulling back on the platform crane and looking down and then coming off of it. And that was based off of those, just those bright, colorful Tide commercials and stuff and musical type things. And then there's the watch commercial. We looked up a lot of like Rolex commercials and stuff to see, it had to be, I was just like, I want her just to be gold and flowy and that kind of like perfume commercial ad.
Right.
Referenced a lot of those for that.
Well, and the champagne ad, I suppose you'd call it, and the watch thing. I was looking at your Instagram and I saw a small behind the scenes photo of at least the watch bomb diffusal ad, and relatively simple lighting setup.
Yeah,
I was shocked because normally a lot of those things tend to be not overlit for the sake of overlighting, but just to get that look, it takes a lot. And I was wondering if you could walk me through kind of how you got that look and also the champagne look, because I feel like those are very achievable on like even a
it was insane budget. First I was like, wait, you want it to look like a commercial, but you're not giving us any time to shoot it or prep it. And so I had this idea of what you do for those sorts of things, and I kept them in a very tight mobile package. So like there's an exterior of a bank we used, and I just had them like build this tent outside and white it out so it was white and flowy, and we, we're at a location. I'm like, this is what it's one of those things where you're at a location, you're trying to use what they have because you don't have the rigging time.
Right.
Kind of just went with it. And one of my main lights, we got a breezy light because I was like, let's use that. And we don't use it any other time in the show, but it literally was the beauty light that we would bring in behind camera to give them that look that would really hit their highlights and everything.
Right. People would call that an octabox these days because all the photography stuff has moved on. But yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I don't even think we ended up with a breezy light in the end because it was pretty expensive, and we ended up getting the spider version of that.
Oh, the redback.
Yes.
Love that thing.
That guy. I think that's what's in the picture.
Mm.
Yeah. And it was just going into a place and quickly being like off, on, add this, and we'll get that look. It was we didn't have to shoot a full on commercial. It was very specific. So it was just, pulling out all the stops to kind of, fake it as much as we could.
Yeah. Well, because in the photo, yeah, it's just like I guess the redback and then kind of a scratch light. And some top, or were those turned off?
Yeah, the chandelier turned off because in the wide you want to see it, but up close it was just all these shadows, and you couldn't have that in the commercial. So, and then it was a place that was really old, and you can't rig anything, and so the guys came in through a light and did some cross beams up there to be able to get a light map because you have to have some sense of top lighting, but it really has to fall nicely. And it was just kind of approaching our lighting, very different for every setup. And the crew loved it. I mean, we just had a gaffer was just like, I love this. I love this. Like not having to do the same thing every day, just always changing it up. That was fun. And then we would immediately go to post commercial in the same location and have to create a different look.
Right.
It look like those commercial lights aren't on anymore.
Well, and it goes back to what we were saying about like process versus results is like, I think most people in the film world, at least that I've met, that I've worked with, including myself, prefer to, it's just creative problem solving. It's like anything else, it's just in this case, the end result is a film versus like, building a house into an interesting, no one's pissed off at architects, but it's the same, mental process of like, oh, I've been given a lot. How do I make the client happy or whatever? But
build on your experiences. I mean, you have to watch a lot of things to know a lot of different things, and you have to work fast because there is no reshoot time. There is no like, I can't take 3 hours to light this person.
Right.
You have to really. But that's the beauty of these sorts of shows is having such a great rigging team. So you're planning as much as you can because they'll have it all set up for you by the time you land. So once you're there, the tools you're going to use to make that look. And so it actually happens pretty organically.
Yeah. What about the champagne, the sort of night apartment scene?
Oh, that was, I mean, it's always a thing when directors and producers, they all want to shoot like with the downtown view, the city view with these big windows, and you're like, it's just a mirror of all the lights that we have. And if you want to see that, and we're shooting anamorphic and our lenses are 2.8, and it's, I want to stay at, 1250 or whatever. It's a thing. It was a challenge, but we just kept it simple with our lights, very controlled so that we could cut it from the glass. Honestly, I think a lot of that is hidden away in some PTSD closet of mine.
Sure.
Like, how the hell did I light myself out of that? I mean, that happens a lot. Somehow you do it and you look back and you go, you just like wipe your brow and go, I can't believe I lit myself out of that disaster. It was because of the glass windows and it's at night and you see everything. And it wasn't as big as you'd think. It was actually, you get to these places and it's very narrow. And there's not much room. You could put a light mat and a frame, and then you start to see it in frame, so it becomes challenging.
Yeah, I've yet to hit the point in my career where I'm being faced with challenges like that, so to speak. But whenever it's like a short film, or I just shot a clothing ad that was supposed to be like a short film basically, and they always want to shoot in a bathroom, and they want to shoot in a practical bathroom, and they want it to look really good, and they want it to be an over the shoulder, and I'm like, please, anything else? And they're like, but what about the bathroom? I was like, we're not doing it. We're just not. Trust me. We don't have time, or we don't have money.
They want to do that, and you're like, we're going to see ourselves. No, we'll just angle this, angle, and then you just start seeing it just doesn't become the shot you wanted it to be. And it's like, and you do that a couple times, and you're like, the next time they ask me, I'm just going to say, can we get VFX on this call, please? And just talk about, I know what you want. And it doesn't happen that way. Like, there's just different ways, maybe if you gave me a big enough bathroom, maybe I could do it. But you want it on this location.
The thing that I did was that actually got me out of this was I walked because the shoot I'm thinking of right now, there was only 5 of us, me, Gaffer, Grip, PA, and then creative, and I was directing as well. And so he's like, oh, we want the bathroom shot, and I go, come here, and because he was taking photos, and I was like, find me the angle that you want, the shot that you want, and take the photo and show it to me, and then we'll do that. And he spent maybe 3 minutes zooming in and out, getting, and then he goes, all right, I get you. And then we dropped it.
My favorite mirror shot that was ever done, I think, is the one from the Jodie Foster movie with
Contact.
Contact with up the Steadicam shot, and it was basically just put in post into the. I mean, it's such a great shot though.
That's Contact. This is why the death of physical media is upsetting to me. I got Contact over here in a little Blu-ray show. Contact is such an incredible film that I don't think is on any streamers, and you wouldn't advertise, go pick up this movie from '97. Remember Goldeneye? It's the same antenna array.
Yeah. Isn't that? It's cool.
I love that movie.
That's why I still try and keep as many DVDs as I can. There's movies also I've referenced to people. I'm like, oh, you have to see Levity. And they're like, that. And I'm like, well, you can't get it on streaming. It's not out. I mean, every time I check, you need to order the DVD. But it's such a good movie. And it's Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know about it, but it's actually quite poetic, and they do some really great things, and that like flashbacks and dream sequence things. It's such a great movie, and it's not available except on DVD.
Yeah, or you get in a Kevin Smith situation where someone has a vendetta against you and holds your movie.
Yeah,
like you couldn't see Dogma for like Dogma Blu-rays go for $80.
Yeah,
because that horrible ass person decided.
I had no idea.
Yeah, it was. He's in jail. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was a problem. Do you know what I saw? Actually, I forgot to bring this up at the beginning. Your first gig was interning on Sideways, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in St. Helena, California. The first movie set I was ever on was Sideways.
No kidding.
I was 13 at the time, probably. And my dad knew where it was going because his friend owned like the winery they were shooting on or whatever. And I wanted to get into film because I was a kid and I fucking printed out a resume.
Oh my God. It's so adorable.
And just walk onto the set, and I like handed it to, it must have been a PA, but they all looked like adults to me. And I was like, I'd like to help for the day. And then they're like, all right, just stand there. And I just stood there by like the honey wagon or whatever. And then they had a conversation, and then they came back and they're like, maybe tomorrow. And I came back tomorrow and they had wrapped.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
They bailed on me.
That was such an amazing experience, that movie. And that's how Faden became my mentor. On that film, because we both had a love of French New Wave, obviously because his family are the Cassavetes. I have such a funny story. So I I'd come from Chicago. I never lived away from home. It's my first year out. And then not only am I living with roommates for the first time in LA, but now I have to live up in Santa Barbara and work as an intern on this big ass movie. And it's Thanksgiving and I'm super depressed and I don't know where to go. And Freddie goes, "Oh, come to my Aunt Jenna's house." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Thank you." You know, and I go there and I'm like in this old Hollywood house. I'm like, "Oh, it's like, there's Emmys and there's pictures of all these famous people. That's cool." And I go in the back and there's Jenna Rollins just chilling out. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And then Zan Cassavetes comes and what's his name? The son comes out, Nick comes out too,
Right.
and his family. And I was just like, I have come from Chicago and now I'm in the house of the Cassavetes. This is the coolest thing ever.
Right.
And that was my big
Like,
Hollywood.
am I being punked?
Yeah, no, really. And I was just like, "Thanks for the turkey," like this poor little wannabe filmmaker just, hanging out with these icons who I knew about. And I loved indie filmmaking. So, I mean, it was such a cool experience. And Alexander Payne and all of them on the set, I mean, they were just so generous and nice. And all the wineries gave us free wine. I still have a couple bottles. And my job, which I wish they still did this with interns, my job was to shoot all of Faden's lighting setups with the old Polaroid films,
For the setup itself or to get the exposure, to figure out the exposure?
there. So every setup in front of the camera, Rafi Sanchez, his gaffer, I'd have my light meter, and he goes, "Oh, we're shooting at this stop," and I would read the stop. So I have the book still. That was my gift from Faden of every lighting setup of Sideways with all of the pictures.
Oh, wow.
Because that's how they used to check their contrast.
Right.
At lunchtime, there was a film trailer and everyone was in their makeup AD focus puller gaffer and they would watch the dailies and you could feel people sweating, but also, I mean, that's how they all made it better every day. And I remember thinking, "Oh, one day I'm going to be in that hot seat and I'm going to have to face my dailies with the producer and director in the film trailer, projected dailies at lunch." And it never happened, but
Right.
I don't do that anymore. But
Now it's on an iPad.
can you imagine, like, as a focus puller too? I mean, that's when people were like focus pullers, they get fired. They're day one. If it's not in focus, they're out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Being a first AC must have been, I shot film I went to film school before I went to college and we shot 16 there, but we were pulling our own focus, so it was like and you couldn't do it and we were kids. So, we're not measuring appropriately or anything. So, but I can't, being like eyeballing it too without like laser measures and shit, just putting tape on the ground and being like, "I got it."
I know.
Bold people.
It's a talent I can't do. And that's why ACs are a little weird,
Yeah. They're like hockey goalies.
Yeah.
Something little screws loose.
They're just different. They work differently.
Yeah.
Be able to do that.
I saw you had you and I have another shared thing. One of Anthony Stavalier's light meter holsters.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's the best.
It's the best.
I got one for my color meter too.
I just got one. I was so excited because I was going to shoot, hear this, I was going to shoot the biggest show of my career and go up to Canada and shoot this period piece Western before the strikes, right? And I'm like, I got to get me one of these holster things because we're going to be riding horses and scouting and stuff. It's going to be amazing. And I got it, which was fantastic. But then when the strike happened, and when it came back, I totally got dropped from the movie because they were like, "We have to go local." The Canadian wouldn't allow, like they weren't giving the work visas, and
Right.
so I mean, I had like the scripts and the storyboards, and I was like, everyone's sweating over the strikes, and I'm secretly like, "I'm good, I got a job." Oh man, when that
Psych.
hit, and psych. But at least I got my holster finally. I've
Yeah.
been looking for years. So
Yeah, I know. I hit him up like when I can't remember who posted it, but I hit him up like the day he started offering, maybe like that month. And I was just asking like how much it would be. And at the time, I think he said like $300. And I was like, all right, let me get my money together. Cause I wanted one for the color meter and for the light meter.
Yeah.
And then I finally, like 2 years later, get back to him and he's like, buddy, there's like a 6 month wait and the price has gone up. And I was like, that's fine. Let's,
Oh, I wasn't even supposed to get mine so soon. I mean, I had mine on order for like months, but my DIT Eduardo is like his neighbor and
oh,
went
sick.
and said, "Hey, rush this forward." And I got mine early. I was like, "Oh my God, that's so cool."
I'll have to send you a photo of mine because it's he puts some really good work into it. All right, we're coming up on time. I gotta let you go soon. But I did want to ask, just because the going back to the show, obviously, the the whole meta aspect of the show is inescapable, you know. And I was wondering how you approach shooting the show with that in mind. Like, were you visually trying to explore like a meta narrative within the cinematography of the show, or were you kind of letting the text do that work and kind of what was in front of camera?
Uh, I I felt like the the meta part of it was really in between the lines and about it. It kind of it, it was a bit subjective, and that my part in it was making sure that, like, with, you work a lot with the seconds and as a DP and getting the background right. I mean, sometimes you have great seconds. We had great ones who were able to set background, but you're working with them to hide those little clues in. And then with the lighting, just always trying to work hard and not be lazy about it, but adding those backlights and cues and just trying to support those different ideas every single setup. Um, and and hoping for the best. I mean, honestly, I'm very happy that it's being received so well. And I think as a crew, we were like, this was crazy. We hope people get it and like it, because it was just, sometimes for us, we were trying to figure it out, and that was fun. But yeah, I think it was just leaning on things that we knew that were specific to the genre. And it was very genre based and leaning into that. So, even there's a point too when I think it's in 4 when Lana comes up and it's at sunrise and she's got the gun and she goes freeze at the docks and all the cops come.
Right.
And we had to get that right because it had to feel like that movement and crescendo moment. And so it was just like, that's meta because it, in its perfection, it is exactly what you would expect at that moment. And so that was the goal.
Yeah, there's certainly like a lot of like I think there's one shot of her like walking to her car. It's like a day shot, it might be the second episode. And it's just like a low pullout, and that just felt very 90s action, 80s 90s action move. For whatever reason, I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
Terminator. I don't know what this is, but I know it.
Yes, leaning into the genre and that style of shooting was big. Like even when we did the kung fu and we
Right.
did with the old guys and the old cops, it was like camera started. We went up, because we weren't shooting low, we were shooting up higher and shooting, you know, uh, like I did a Kavinsky music video a long time ago, and he's very into 80s nostalgia Americana, right? So we pretty much limited colors to like those primary colors that you would see pop up so much. It was kind of like that. You kind of embrace that time period and just set rules, because honestly, there's 1,000 ways to shoot something. So I feel like some limitations are helpful.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it escaped me. This is what happens when I don't write my notes on the paper. My phone kept buzzing, so I had to throw it away. One thing that took me a really long time to understand was it was in the director's commentary for The Game, of all films. And David Fincher was talking about it's way more important than what you do than what you don't do. And I never understood what that meant until I had, about 170 of these conversations. And then at one day it like clicked. And I was like, oh, because that's you're telling the audience what this isn't. And on a film or on a show like yours, there is so much going on that what you don't do is so much more important than what you did do, because it keeps it constrained to something that is manageable for the audience and probably you for making it. But like, if you could just do everything, this is an open playground almost. So I was really curious as to what weren't you guys doing? What like rules did you put on yourselves to make sure that everything stayed coherent and cohesive?
I well, I could definitely easily talk about Willis's World because you have this feeling like you should do more coverage, because there's these dialogue scenes and stuff. But it was really in that style of early Hong Kong films or whatever. It's almost documentary like, not quite, but it's wider eye lines and it's just letting them take you from one and being more free. Like if they want to walk all the way over there, I mean, that's what you're lit for. You're just lighting the place to be able to let them move because you want to feel like you're in their life. So having that rule of let's not limit so much and let's not worry about so much coverage and see where it goes, and staying handheld was a thing. There were moments when I was like, boy, this just feels like we should just be pushing into Lily, and doing like a slow push in. She's just giving so much, but no, it's not. We're not going to do it. We're going to stay right here in this medium shot, and you watch it cut together, and you get drawn into it just because of the character. So that was definitely something. And then in the cop show, it was the camera always has to move, and that's like, it's difficult for me because you always want to motivate a camera movement, but even in its over the shoulders, you have to just we're constantly moving it, and that was something, even though why that's difficult is because our show still moves. So you're not just planted there. So we were doing things with dolly tracks on sliders because wherever we stopped, we had to keep moving, but then we also have to follow them. That kind of stuff gets a bit complicated. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a ton more things, but maybe there'd be a commentary, an episode commentary, and it would come to me. You know what I mean?
I legitimately, I I should just be the change I want to see in the world at some point. But I really miss directors' commentaries, and I'm like, how easy would it be for Netflix, Hulu, whoever, to instead, English, Japanese, Indian, fucking, oh, that's a real language. Sorry, director's commentary.
Yeah.
Like, how big is an audio as an MP3? It's not that big.
I really loved the Penguin that came out.
Yeah.
My last gaffer and key grip, they did the lighting on that, and so we were talking about it on the show I was doing, and so I was like, well, I can't wait for it to come out, and so I watched it, and they didn't have so much commentary as just HBO had special features.
Yeah.
So you could access, and I was like, this is great because I actually loved hearing about the things they do, and there were a couple episodes I was just really curious about, and I was like, I wish more shows did that.
Well, and specifically, so I've mentioned this idea before. I think there should be a special features streamer,
Yeah.
but the issue is a lot of these old DVDs, the special features are different. I think the turning point was Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings trilogy special features 12 hours. It's longer than the fucking trilogy. But everything kind of before that was a lot more like giving someone a high-8 camera and just recording. And there was no commentary, there was no interviews, and really you were just watching the film get made, and it was being edited as its own narrative, and that's hugely instructive because
Yeah.
there's no like PR company coming in and trying to like fix what you're seeing. A lot of the modern special features are ads.
Yeah.
You get interviews and sometimes you get a nugget, but like the nugget to noise ratio is kind of high. But one of the great ones that I always think about is Hellboy 2. Actually, all of Guillermo's films. Guillermo does great behind the scenes.
I
Yeah.
love I love. I got. I mean, again, when you're coming up, you're watching the behind the scenes just to see how it is they're doing it. I mean, that was the best part. When AC Magazine used to show more lighting plots, I feel like they used to show more lighting plots and more designs of like how they technically did things because you were just like sewing on, like, wow, how did they create that? I love really good technical behind the scenes. Atomic Blonde has some good ones with the operating, and I modeled a camera on FBI based on that backpack camera he had rigged because we needed to chase people. And I saw that behind the scenes. I was like, oh, we got to get the camera really small and tied to the waist like that and to be able to do chase scenes.
Yeah.
So,
Did you I guess your episode's going to come out before his, but did you see Greg Fraser's lighting plot thing on the AC Magazine website?
Yeah, that was really
130, for anyone who hasn't seen it, 132 pages or something of lighting plots and really great like close-ups of the set, just textures and stuff. And I kind of scared him because I was like, hey man, I love seeing that on some of these you had at times 1,000 fixtures, every cream source vortex under the sun in whatever city they filmed that in, Budapest. And yet it still is just like, you know, soft top light, soft outside slash. That's it. You know, the concept was small, but the execution was big. I was like, because that makes it so that anyone can see that and go like, oh, I can do that. It's not hard. And he's like, if anyone looks at that and thinks they can't do it because it's too big, then I should not have put that out. I was like, no. It's exactly the opposite, I think. I think it just shows, even on a movie like Dune, concepts are simple and are achievable. And I think showing lighting plots can do that as long as you have a commentary, I think, for new people like AC would do, where like, think of these in singles. Don't think of all the fixtures. Think of what light they're applying, you know, especially when you see a bunch of space lights, like that can be scary.
It's problem solving, it's control. You want to control. And the bigger the set, the more you're going to need to control it. So that's what it is.
Yeah. Do you find that being on a set is
invest in incandescent light bulbs? Buy as many as you can.
Where can you get them?
My garage is filled with like light bulbs. I just, when I can, I try and buy 40 watts and 60 watts, clear and frosted, you know?
Where are you getting them? Because here in LA,
I know you can't in LA anymore, but like a year and a half ago, I bought some online, and I think there's still places out of Canada or whatever. And I'm going to start shipping them to my family in Chicago just to get my hands on some. I shot in Prague for Hunters, and I needed a bunch of, you know, clear glass bulbs. And the guys were like, we brought all the ones we had, and this is all that's left because we can't get them anymore. And I was like, oh, this is like having gold. I mean, you know, I hope that we're still able to get incandescent bulbs when we need them.
You can get I've done this where you can get like a chandelier, like a plastic chandelier. Basically, it's like a spider. Basically, it's like, you know, like that with one in the middle, and you just have to make sure that obviously with LED we haven't had to think about like wattages and like burning anything out forever. But you have to think about if this chandelier can handle the wattage you're putting through it. But you can get oven bulbs.
Oh,
they're like 20, but if you get 6 of them,
you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, the color is so beautiful. I was making homemade lights when I started off, which are still some of the best lights are homemade lights, right? Yep. And the chicken coops and stuff, they still have the best color and quality and texture, batch strips and stuff. We use that on Interior Chinatown. We use some old batch strips.
Yeah, I actually did. So I'm a giant. Once I got a color meter, I went crazy. I was writing so many articles about it. I've also, if you'd like to know, the best practical bulb that I've found, LED, GE Sun-filled.
Okay.
GE Sun. So in your house, if you're just looking for like a nice tungsten or daylight, GE Sun-filled is the move. Highest TLCI, highest color.
Very important.
Say again?
These things are very important, these household light bulbs and stuff.
Yeah.
Very important because, Nix bulbs don't always cut it. They got the weird shadow thing right now, and I'm sure they're working on fixing that. But you can't just pop a Nix bulb into every fixture that you want to control. You need those light bulbs.
Yeah. Yeah. Stera has some of those. Obviously, Aperture has their bulbs.
They got that battery at the bottom, and the quality, you don't always get the hard light. And then at the same time, at the bottom, the lampshade, you can see the shadow of the battery pack and stuff. So they're useful a lot, but not for everything. You still need to be able to get some light bulbs.
Yeah. Well, and to your point about the light quality, like that was the thing I was most interested in is if I remember correctly, I put what I measured as a really decent LED tungsten bulb. And then I measured it and it looked good. And then I filmed it. Same camera, same everything, just filmed the light. Actually, with the chandelier thing I just told you about. That's why I have it in there. And the thing that was shocking to me is I was so perfectly fine with the tungsten LED. And then when I saw the real tungsten, it was like the tungsten LED might as well have been black and white. It was so lifeless in comparison. And I was like, that's crazy because we see that so much that we don't even think about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. Like when you see them next to each other, it's you realize like it makes you want to hoard light bulbs.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you wish you could use my theory. You can tell me if this is a reasonable theory because you've worked on larger sets. Is it possible to just light everything with cream sources and sky panels or whatever, and then have your key be a true tungsten, like a 5K or whatever? Or would someone push back on that and be like, why are we doing that? Or would that be annoying?
That all the time.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I've done that quite a few times. And I think gappers understand it too, especially experienced ones, because they know about the quality of tungsten, but it saves them a lot to be able to have these broader LED sources and stuff like that. And, but the quality is, I once had to take a Fresnel lens off of a 5K just to get the hardness that I wanted from a 5K, coming in through a window. So, yeah. Well, so until that improves and matches, I mean, yeah, there's something about it though.
Yeah, it's something. It specifically with skin too. Obviously, like now, if you point it at a bookshelf, it'll look the same. But there's something about the way that skin reacts to flame. It's primal. Again, it goes back to as viewers, we just get it. We don't have to explain everything.
It's these waveforms that hit the skin tones, I don't know how, like, and with the makeup too. I mean, the makeup will pick up any kind of green that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, but I got to let you go because it's not only is it later for you, but I have to go do something. But I would love to have you back on though, because I'm sure we could talk for hours about this kind of shit.
We're a fun conversation. We should do it again.
Yeah. Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production, produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to frameandrefpod.com and clicking on the Patreon button. It's always appreciated, and as always, thanks for listening.